Have you ever had one of those movies where you watched it only once when you were younger, only to find out that people hated it, but you just assume that it's an underrated gem based purely on that one viewing? James Franco Oz movie. Oz the Great and Powerful is another one of those Disney blockbusters from the early 2010s that just sort of came and went. I remember watching it once with my family over a decade ago at this point, and despite not having prior knowledge of Wizard of Oz outside of parodies, I thought it was a decent fantasy film. But now that I have more knowledge of this franchise through watching its more famous film adaptations and even reading some of the books that inspired them, does it still hold up? Well, definitely not from a visual standpoint, but we'll get to that later. For now, let's just cover how this movie came to reality. This movie finds its inception in the publication of L. Frank Baum's The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in 1900, which would ultimately spawn 13 sequels. Also, I don't know if this is a Doki Doki Panic Mario 2 sort of factoid, but I need to discuss it anyway. L. Frank Baum? Alphaba. Yeah, that blew my mind when I found out too. Now, if you know about The Wizard of Oz today, it's likely due to MGM's iconic film adaptation. After the film's gradual notoriety, Disney would buy the rights to all of the novel's sequels for a film adaptation titled The Rainbow Road to Oz. And that road went ultimately nowhere, and in a desperate attempt to retain the rights to the books, the studio would create the film Return to Oz. Despite the cult classic following this 80s dark fantasy take on the Oz universe eventually found, the effort failed as the film flopped both critically and financially, and all of the books eventually fell into the public domain, leaving the Oz franchise open to adaptations by anyone. Even Disney again! Fast forward decades later, screenplay writer Mitchell Kapner is pitching potential movie scripts to Hollywood producer Joe Roth, and after Roth rejects all of them, he asks Kapner about what he's been reading lately, and he discusses sharing the Oz books with his kids and reading the book in the series that covers how the wizard arrived in Oz. Roth instantly latched onto the concept, both because of the intrigue behind the title character of the iconic film, and the way it sounded like a fairy tale film that could appeal to boys. With Roth's encouragement, Kapner threw together a rough storyline that Roth then pitched to Disney, who put the film into production with Sam Raimi of Evil Dead and Spider-Man fame being brought on to direct the film. How exactly did Raimi get the job? Simple. He was Roth's next-door neighbor. That is some real Kingdom Hearts being the result of Disney and Japan and Square Enix sharing an office-level coincidental production. After that, there's nothing all that interesting about the production itself when compared to the absolute nightmare that was the production of the MGM movie. But one detail that needs to be mentioned is that the crew really wanted the film to evoke the 1939 film. While this would happen in terms of legally gray narrative decisions and character designs that we'll discuss soon enough, it also involved the set production. The filmmakers wanted to capture the same feeling of the original film, and did so by avoiding green screen in favor of constructing as many sets as possible. Like I said, we'll discuss that soon enough. When it was all said and done, the film released on March 8th, 2013, and on a budget of $200 million, it grossed approximately $490 million. A decent result by far, but it likely wasn't the surefire success that Disney hoped it would be. And with all that out of the way, let's jump into this public domain parable. You're watching the LionDog Show, and I'm watching Oz the Great and Powerful. The film kicks off with a stylized opening credit sequence, which combines old-timey circus design with a Danny Elfman score that gives off the feeling that they really wanted Tim Burton to direct this film, but he was too busy with dark shadows. The film proper begins in black and white with a circus located in Kansas in the year 1905, where we meet amateur magician Oscar Diggs, or Oz for short. While preparing for his next show in his trailer, we learn that Oz hired a lady to pose as an audience member for his show, and to sweeten the deal, he offers her a music box that he claims came from his grandmother who died in the console wars or something. Also, it's implied through how his assistant Frank responds to her that this is a common occurrence for James Franco, Oz. When given the earnings for his show, he gives Frank a cheap cut, and the lady...
The applause will be approbation enough.
Dude, Oz is literally paying his stage girl an exposure, bullying him on social media or in the 1905 periodicals or whatever.
Let's go make some magic.
He did the thing! When it comes time for Oz's show to begin, he requests a volunteer from the audience, and the lady doesn't even raise her hand. I'm starting to see why Oz didn't pay her.
A simple country girl, ladies and gentlemen.
Ah yes, because pointing it out makes it far less suspicious. The performance goes off swimmingly until some schmuck from the audience claims that Oz used AI to hide his wires. Okay, when Frank grabbed the sword for Oz, I originally thought that he was gonna kill that naysayer. Instead, Oz uses the sword to cut the wires and make those Oz deniers in the audience look so dumb. His trick also captivates this disabled girl in the audience, who then asks him to make her walk, and Oz's response to this request can be summarized with,
Dang it!
What in don't you close the damn door!
Okay, I have got to set a limit on how many Raimi Trilogy references I make in this video. Anyway, after that mess, an old friend of Oscar's named Annie arrives to let him know that she's getting married and to get his opinion on if she should marry her suitor or him. It's also worth noting that the suitor's name is John Gale. Like Dorothy Gale? 6 degrees of separation? Nah, try 2. Oscar, however, brushes aside the thought of them being together as he sees himself as a man who hasn't reached his true potential. And after he explains this, Bonesaw's husband starts threatening him outside. The strong man bursts into his trailer, but Oz uses his little Goblin Jr. magic to teleport out of it, where he then hitches a ride on a hot air balloon that people try to stop until they notice an impending tornado. It took them that long to notice it? You'd think the fierce winds would have tipped them off. Much like the original film. And book, Oz's balloon gets pulled into the twister, where he then does his best impression of 8-year-old me after I fell off my bike and slightly bruised my knee.
I don't want to die! I haven't accomplished anything yet!
Fortunately, it appears that God answered his prayers as his balloon lands safely in the CGI landscape. I mean, this totally real fantasy world. I mean, just look at it. It's beautiful. It's like a freaking fairy tale. At this point, the film also sheds its monotone colors and 4:3 aspect ratio in a similar vein to how the 1939 film becomes Technicolor once Dorothy enters Oz. And while it's a decent effort, it just fails to hold a candle to the original's transition. The film handles the shift from black and white to color in such a clever way that even my Gen Z autistic brain raised on a steady diet of Marvel movies and B-grade DreamWorks movies couldn't help but feel that classic movie magic when I first watched the film last year. In this film, they simply turn up the saturation and change the aspect ratio. That's not special. IMAX movies do that all the time. I think that they should have just switched the coloring and aspect ratio after they cut to black during the storm. Maybe even have a POV shot of Oscar opening his eyes in Oz for the first time. Oz's balloon lands in a rushing river, where this movie then turns into an attraction at Animal Kingdom's Avatar Land before he reaches solid ground to meet the witch Theodora. Doubt she'll be important at all. Once Oz gives her his name, she assumes he arrived to fulfill an ancient prophecy and become the King of Oz.
You are the wizard, aren't you?
Yes.
And with that, our Lair revealed plot is now activated! The two then hear the Wicked Witch's monsters, so they play a rousing game of Oz Temple Run, now available on smartphone devices, to escape them. Both of them then hide under a tiny waterfall, where Oz uses a dove to distract the monster. Okay, that dove has been inside his coat since before his show. How did it not die or suffocate? Man, if she only took one more step back, this movie would have been over much sooner. While resting for the night, Theodora gets Ozzy up to speed on the Wicked Witch and how she poisoned her father to take over Oz until Theodora's sister banished her. And since Oz is such a sentimental man, he gives her yet another music box from his grandma. Maybe his parents just remarried a lot.
May I have this dance, milady?
Ha! I don't know. This dancing is fun and all, but it would have been better if they were also making dinner. The following day, the two are continuing their journey to the Emerald City behind an equally emerald green screen when they come across a winged monkey named Finley, who Oz protects from the Lion from Codename Steam. Okay, listen. You are more than allowed to dislike this movie. You are, however, not allowed to dislike Finley. He is such a good contrast to Oz's self-centered personality while also being a genuinely funny comic relief. He is easily the highlight of this movie.
Be gone, coward!
You're a wonderful wizard.
Okay, those two lines being basically back-to-back are practically begging for a Miles Teller cameo. Luckily, the group, now featuring Finley of course, doesn't have to travel on foot any longer as a fanfare led by a munchkin named Nook arrives to take them to the city.
He's just a real, good, solid wizard, everyone. How'd I do?
Honestly, pretty well for Oz's standards.
Simple country girl.
Upon entering the city, Oz is introduced to Theodora's sister Evanora, who then takes him to the kingdom's treasury, where he Scrooge McDucks all over the joint. Okay, I joke, but face it, I'm sure all of us would do the same thing if we were in his shoes. Unfortunately, he doesn't get all this wealth right away, as prophecy states that he'll only receive the throne once he defeats the Wicked Witch. And because he just really needs that chalice, Oz and Finley set out to destroy the Wicked Witch's wand to restore peace to the land. Okay, one thing I don't get is why Oz doesn't tell Theodora about the quest. At first he expresses a desire to do so, but when Evanora says that she'll explain to her, he suddenly wants it to be kept a secret. He knows he'll likely talk to her again if he wants to return and claim his fortune. He might as well be honest. While on their journey, the two see a path leading to a ruined town, so Finley, being the saint that he is, insists that he and Oz investigate Chinatown, which is an obvious reference to Whiplash for the PlayStation 2.
Forget it, Spanx. It's Chinatown.
Okay, when I originally saw this film, I assumed that they made this area and its inhabitants up purely because it never showed up in any of the parodies that I saw, only for me to discover that it actually appears in the original book. Props to being faithful to the source material in a way that the original film never was. While scouring through the wreckage that is pretty disturbing when you really think about it. The duo come across a little China girl with 2 broken legs. And when I mean 2 broken legs, I mean get out your duct tape because they're literally broken off her body. Oz, however, uses some quick drying glue and she gets back on her feet in no time. China girl then offers to join Oz's party, but Oz won't let her because, I don't know, smalls can't ball.
With feelings.
However, after enough emotional manipulation, Oz finally caves and adds the China girl to Bill's PC. So, can China people cry? Do they even have liquid in their bodies? Or are their tears ceramic? Someone revive L. Frank Baum, I need answers! After traveling through the forest and encountering these weird plant monsters with the eyes of Derpy from K-pop Demon Hunters, the team comes across the Wicked Witch in a cemetery where she just leaves her all-powerful wand unattended while doing something else. She may be wicked, but she sure isn't that smart. Unsurprisingly, a team comprising only of an object on your grandmother's mantle, an incompetent monkey, and Finley is able to grab this carelessly placed wand, and just when Oz is about to complete the side quest, the Wicked Witch reveals herself to be Annie, and Oz is suddenly interested in starting a relationship with her. And we were shocked this guy got Me Too'd because Annie's introduction here actually kind of brings up an interesting question surrounding this film and its connections to the previous films in the franchise. You see, much like the 1939 film, many of the characters in the opening scene in Kansas have Oz equivalents. Finley is Frank, China Girl is the paraplegic girl, and Glinda is Annie. Now, the original MGM film did this to foreshadow that Dorothy's adventure was merely a dream, but this film ends without any indication that it's a dream. Either in this version of the series, Oz is some parallel realm where everyone has a doppelganger, or this film also takes place in a dream even though they never reveal it, like your average 2010s cartoon fan theory. Piggybacking off that point, why did Mila Kunis play the
Simple country girl,
since they serve pretty much the same role in the plot? As I just mentioned, Annie is actually Glinda, who explains how Eva Nora was the one who killed her father and was the true Wicked Witch this whole time. If you needed any more proof that this is a 2010s Disney movie, here's a twist villain. Oh, Eva Nora, you're no Ernesto de la Cruz. Once Eva Nora discovers Oz's disillusionment, she crafts a lie about how Oz is cheating on Theodora to her, which isn't much of a lie. That is exactly what he's doing with Glinda. Eva Nora didn't even have to lie about him giving her another music box. With that being said, Ava actually makes a pretty good point here about how Theodora assumed things about Oz without allowing him to make those choices himself. That isn't really Oz manipulating her as much as it's her simply trusting the first person who treated her with any semblance of kindness after knowing him for only a day. Now, where have we seen that in another 2013 Disney movie? After that revelation, Theodora runs off to her room to sulk about how Oz lied to her, played her, betrayed her. It doesn't take long for Eva Nora to counterattack by sending guards and flying monkeys to attack our quartet, initiating yet another chase scene. They really wanted to justify that temple run tie-in, didn't they? The Oz Squad continues to run until they reach a Donkey Kong Country Return silhouette level where Glinda simply jumps off the cliff and encourages the rest to do the same. Okay, why do all of James Franco's screams sound like he's laughing? And on a related note, why does James Franco always smile like a second grader on school picture day? Instead of sprinkling the yellow brick road with the shards of China Girl, she and the others land in bubbles, which they use to traverse the land, just like Meet the Robinsons. Well, Finley isn't in a bubble because
I have wings.
the party then arrives in Quadling Country, protected by a giant bubble.
I'm gonna die!
You needn't worry, wizard. It's a magic wall, and all good-hearted souls get to pass through.
I'm gonna die!
Thankfully, Oz's plot armor penetrates the defenses and allows him inside the territory. I like to think that the barrier is conscience, and in the period that Oz couldn't enter, it determined whether or not he could be considered pure enough. After being celebrated by the citizens of Quadling Country, Glinda tells Oz that she knows of his con and proceeds to verbally abuse him, which makes me now realize how many of the theatrical versions of Glinda seem to have a sense of humor.
You have no power here. Be gone before somebody drops the house on you too.
Coming back to the witches, Theodora just can't take the heartbreak of being dumped anymore. Girl, just crack open a carton of Haagen-Dazs already. So Eva Nora offers her a poison apple, which turns her into Gruntilda from Pac-Man World. Wicked. A young woman who wants acceptance by society works her way to the point where she gets to work alongside her lifelong hero, only to discover that he oppresses the very people she loves, causing her to sacrifice the acclaim that she desired in favor of finding her inner strength to stand up against him, and leading to one of the most famous musical numbers of the 21st century. Oz the Great and Powerful. Two James Francos laughing at girl. Okay, jokes aside, I actually like Theodora's transformation into the Wicked Witch of the West. for the most part. For starters, the concept alone sounds much more in line with both the original books and movie than Wicked. While execution is everything, if you explain to me the two backstories behind the Wicked Witch, I and many others would assume that this film's came from the original books and that Wicked's came from fanfiction.net. Second, I like how Oz's actions indirectly create his own worst enemy. The opening scene of the film sets up how Oz rotates through female volunteers due to his conniving nature. Naturally, he thinks that he can get away with taking advantage of Theodora, unaware of the powers that she holds. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention she has fire powers. In that way, her turn to evil finally gives him consequences to face. I even appreciate that Theodora wasn't forced to be evil. Evan Nora tells her everything that eating the apple will entail, yet she still eats it just to remove her heart, which isn't too bad of a metaphor for how people cut themselves off emotionally when being hurt by someone they loved. Overall, it's a pretty solid backstory to the Wicked Witch of the West. If it were for the fact that it was caused by a poisoned apple, Disney, do you not know of any other ways to curse someone? To me, it feels like they wanted to give her a green potion to drink, but the filmmakers thought that might be too similar to the green elixir from Wicked, so they changed it to the first cursed artifact that popped into their heads. Now, maybe it's meant to be a biblical allusion to the story of Adam and Eve, and I might have been able to buy that if this weren't a Disney movie. Having a poisoned apple turn someone into the Wicked Witch in a Disney movie is like if in a Batman movie made by Warner Brothers, Bruce's parents were killed by an Acme Anville. Back in Quadling country, Oz and Glinda are assembling a makeshift army comprising of Quadling farmers, tinkerers, and the ever-iconic Munchkins, and guys, I hope you're ready for this, because what I'm about to say is hilarious. The joke is that they sing, but Oz makes them stop singing. Which is also funny because, you see, this is a Disney movie, so you expect them to sing, but instead, they make fun of it, which is rather humorous. Man, we do not talk enough about how most 2010's Disney movie humor has aged like milk.
So let it go.
However, just as my sides are recovering from being split apart by such exquisite comedy, Theodora penetrates the bubble shield and the audience gets their first good look at her as the Wicked Witch of the West. Despite the fact that Theodora clearly has the ability to kill them right then and there, or tear open the protective bubble to allow Evanora's army to take the Quadlings captive, she just exposes Oz as a sham and threatens Glinda a bit. The most harm she does in this scene is polluting the air with her broomstick.
Nice carbon footprint jacket!
Don't be frightened, now that the wizard is with us. Wizard?
Glinda returns to her castle to find Oz packing up because he doesn't want to save Ginny Weasley from the Chamber of Secrets when China Girl asks to be tucked into bed. Aww. While doing so, Oz explains to her that he isn't a real wizard, even though China Girl wants him to bring her family back. Oz then tells her about his favorite inventors since they're the closest things to wizards that he knows, which gives him an idea. If Oz wants to free the kingdom from the witch's reign, he's gotta put on the greatest show the land of Oz has ever seen!
The likes of which the land of Oz has never seen!
Hey, I thought of it first! This leads to an authentic Sam Raimi montage of Oz and his team assembling his master plan using all of his illusionist tricks. It's okay, but it really could have used Kirsten Dunst in a car. Once the preparations are in order, Oz packs up a carriage with Finley, the Master Tinker, and Nook, and the team travels by map to the Emerald City. Also, the guard that stops them from entering is played by Bruce Campbell, aka
It's me, the mayor.
Oh.
While that plan is set in motion, Glinda eliminates the witch's army by luring them into the poppy field with poorly rendered CGI scarecrows, the winged monkey's natural weakness. Unfortunately for her, some monkeys made it out of the field with Glinda in tow. Well, maybe next time, don't hang out at the very edge of the field. China Girl finds her wand on the ground and, for once, can't a villain look behind the object where they heard the noise? Once Oz's crew infiltrates the city, he then ditches the group, and when they suspect him of betraying them, he's all like, "No guys, don't worry, I can explain." Right after I rob you guys real quick. In the town square, the two witches chain up Glinda for her to be executed after Theodora Hindenburg's Oz in his hot air balloon. Okay, look, I get that your supposed savior just betrayed you and died, but look at the bright side, free gold on the ground. Besides, Oz didn't die. He simply faked his death because he got enlisted into Islam. Now with Oz out of the way, the Wicked Sisters plan to use their Mario and Luigi fire and lightning powers to kill Glinda, only for Oz to project himself as an all-powerful entity who has shed his mortal form. This looks like the ending of Megamind. Like, yeah, I know it's supposed to be his head projection from the 1939 movie, but this is just Megamind. Why does this look like Megamind? To be fair, if you're gonna steal, why not steal from the best?
I defy you!
Okay, alright, pack it up, we're done. We're not recovering from that. That line took 8 years off my life. Amidst all the chaos caused by Oz's illusions, China Girl frees Glinda and returns her wand as both of the Wicked Witches flee from the army's fireworks. Okay, so Oz clearly faked his death to really sell the story that he died and took on some immortal form to the entire land of Oz. But then what about these munchkins launching fireworks? Are they aware that they're playing a role in Oz's deception? If they are, there is no way that plan is staying secret. All it takes is one munchkin saying too much and the Wicked Witches will arrive to kill Oz properly this time. They should have just launched the fireworks from the carriage. Hey Theodora, when is your Disney Infinity figure releasing? Within the castle, Glinda confronts Evanora in a magic duel that, even by 2013 standards, looks pretty uninspired. While Evanora knocks Glinda to the ground, it's then revealed that she broke her emerald necklace, which symbolizes the end of Kitty and Diane's friendship before that subplot ultimately got cut. And it also turns Evanora into a gross hag, just like that animated 2010s classic Food Fight, before she hitches a ride on some winged monkeys for a return in the sequels. More on that later. The following day, Glinda reads a letter from Oz that declares the Emerald City free from the Wicked Witch's control and tells them to shine the Oz signal in the sky for James Franco's disembodied head to come to your aid. Within the throne room, Oz and the Master Tinker put the finishing touches on his iconic head projection before he gives gifts to his companions paralleling the end of the original story. And I gotta say, these are pretty lame gifts. Like, Dorothy's friends were getting full-on college degrees and Purple Hearts, while Nook and Finley are getting carnival prizes and hats. China Girl easily gets the shortest end of the stick here. Her gift is just the people around her. I'd rather have the smiley face tort. Like, I get it, epic wholesome found family trope and all that, but look at China Girl. She has clearly been put back together multiple times. If she can be rebuilt on multiple occasions, I'm pretty sure Oz can Mike Wazowski up the parts of her parents and glue them back together. He's just being lazy. As for Glinda, she receives some intense lovemaking from James Franco. Scratch that, China Girl has the second worst gift. And so concludes Oz the Great and Powerful. And while I went into this review planning to bash this film, I ultimately found more to like in it than hate. Obviously, this film has its fair share of issues, and let's just address the biggest one right now. This movie looks ugly. I would even go as far as to say the general consensus for this film would be way more positive if it simply looked better. I feel like the major appeal of the Wizard of Oz franchise is that feeling of unadulterated whimsy, which the visuals in this film simply don't capture. They made a whole behind-the-scenes featurette for this film about how they wanted to recapture the look and feel of the original Wizard of Oz by not relying on CGI, yet 60% of the shots in this film look like clips from James Franco's Let's Play of U-Star 2. Say what you will about the Wicked movies and their color grading, but at least they went through the effort of planting flowers for the opening scene in Munchkin Land. That is literally a field! How hard was it to find a field to film? Sure, there are some practical sets that, well, a little generic, look appealing, but most of the shots look like the post-production team took the well-made practical sets and pulled a Tom Holland Spider-Man suit by replacing them with CGI in some vain attempt to market this film to the Avatar crowd. Speaking of chasing trends, I'm not gonna describe it all that well, but this movie just has this 2010 stink to it, and it's not just the visuals. The plot is filled to the brim with prophecies, betrayals, epic battles, and that sweet nostalgia bait at a time when that was still novel. And despite the intentions, it makes the film feel kinda bland as a result. I could see some who are more far removed from that era seeing it as endearing in a way, but for me, it just didn't land. Aside of those issues, the movie's actually not that bad. Moving over to the characters, while nowhere near as memorable as Dorothy and her companions, they certainly come close to capturing their magic. I already discussed Finley, but for China Girl, while I didn't notice it on my initial viewings for this video, she serves as a decent daughter figure to both Oz and Glinda, with her giving Oz someone to be open and honest without a hint of cynicism. As for Glinda, the scene at the end where she holds China Girl's hand after Oz reminds them that he can't grant wishes because she knows how it feels to lose family was surprisingly emotional for a simple moment, and it makes me wish that there could have been more scenes exploring this connection between the two. As for Glinda herself, well, she's likely the most forgettable of her major theatrical incarnations, with them going for a basic YA fantasy feel for her. She has a bit more humor and depth to her than one may realize. Her spending most of the film doing the bare minimum of magic only to actually fight back near the end could be seen as lazy writing, which it like likely is, but I prefer to see it as her allowing the main characters to prove their strength and only resorting to magic when it's actually necessary, something that is in character for Glinda in the original film. As a fan of the archetypal mentor figure who could easily solve every problem but instead steps back to give the protagonist an opportunity to grow, I thought it was a clever use of the character. When it comes to Nuck and the Master Tinker, they're just kinda there. If they weren't included during the gift scene at the end, I probably wouldn't have mentioned them. Moving over to the antagonists, Evanor is kinda boring, just your standard corrupt ruler that's a dime a dozen in the fantasy genre. As for Theodora, I think they did a decent job copying Wicked's homework without making it look too obvious, even if the explanation for the green skin felt super forced. I honestly wish that they stuck with those tear burn marks that she had for a couple scenes, but I get that they likely wanted to include the classic look to plaster on posters. Also, credit to Mila Kunis' evil laugh, it was on point. And then we have Oz. I like him, but that kinda feels by default as I love the archetype of the lovable con artist. Still, I think he experiences a solid arc of putting others' needs before his own and learning to use the skills that he once used to swindle others to save them. Give me any plot about the protagonist accomplishing a seemingly impossible task by playing to their unique strengths and I'll be clapping like a seal. With that being said, I just find him too heroic to buy this being the same man from either the original book or the movie. This is a guy who kidnaps the rightful heir of Oz, hires a witch to change her identity so that she never finds out, sends a child to do his dirty work, and then leaves the moment someone discovers his secret. That doesn't strike me as the upstanding protagonist this movie portrays him to be. And that's okay. This isn't the original books or the original movie, so it's perfectly fine to reinterpret the wizard as the protagonist. It's not perfectly fine, however, to have Oz never truly evolve past his womanizing ways. I'm not sure if this is just because he's played by James Franco, but it kinda bugs me that he sees the consequences of leading women astray through Theodora and tries to make things right with her, all while he moves on to wooing Glinda. No wonder Theodora doesn't accept his apology. Now she's gonna sing in the woods about being friend-zoned. I think it would have been better if they kept Oz and Glinda as good friends, with Oz spending the remainder of the film trying to win back Theodora. But when that ultimately fails, they hint at a romance to be explored in the sequel. Yeah, despite the fact that a sequel was planned with Mila Kunis confirming that the cast signed on for more movies and Kapner working on a script, that never materialized. Like I said at the start, this movie likely broke even, but I bet Disney couldn't help but compare it to the performance of 2010's Alice in Wonderland and wish that it made more. Wow, color me shocked that the CGI-heavy fantasy movie that released less than 3 months after Avatar grossed more than the CGI-heavy fantasy movie released over 3 years after Avatar. Though, I personally think this actually works out in Oz's favor, as this film doesn't really need a sequel. They don't leave that many loose ends, as all the major plot points and origins are explained, so viewers can jump into The Wizard of Oz with no issues. The only detail left unaddressed are the ruby slippers, which might have been an intentional choice as legal red tape would have forced them to make them the book's original silver, ruining the whole illusion of this being a prequel to the movie. Sure, they could have done more with the characters this movie introduced, or adapted more elements from the books that never made it into the MGM movie, but I just don't think people would care. The average viewer doesn't even know they made more than one book. Do you really think they'd attend a Thursday evening showing of Oz 2 just to see James Franco interact with H.M. Wogglebug? Well, I wouldn't have said no to a continuation of this iteration of Oz. When compared to many films from this era that assumed they would make sequels and tease them only for nothing to follow, there is something oddly commendable about this film being a one-off story. So, those are my thoughts on Oz the Great and Powerful. This might sound odd for a film that isn't all that groundbreaking, but we need more movies like this. Not in terms of visual effects, heavens no, but in an age where studios use the public domain as a lazy way to trick people into watching their soulless films, it's nice to see a film that at the very least tries to be creative with a non-copyrighted story. I obviously wouldn't take this movie over the other major film adaptations of this franchise, but if you're ever marathoning all the Wizard of Oz movies, it's definitely worth watching. You've been watching The LionDog Show, have a great day, and stick around for more.